Dear students, welcome to the new session. In today's session, we are going to discuss on the topic models of corporate governance. In the last two sessions, we have discussed about the overview of governance, and in the second session, we have discussed about the different systems, the global concerns, and the increasing awareness about corporate governance. In today's session, we are going to deal with this topic of models. In the corporate governance structure, we have several basic elements. The pattern of share ownership, the key players in the corporate sector, the composition of board of directors, the interaction among the key players. So all these elements form the corporate governance structure, and these elements differ from country to country. So the corporate decisions that requires the approval of shareholders. So when these structures differ from different countries, that results in different models as well. So in today's session, we are going to discuss on such models. The first model is the Anglo-Saxon model or the Anglo-US model. How we characterize this particular model is that in terms of the ownership of individual and increasingly institutional, this model is also known as the outsider model. So here investors, they are not affiliated with the corporation. So as they have not been affiliated with the corporation, you call this as an outsider model. And Anglo-US model has a very well developed legal framework that defines the rights and responsibilities of the major three key players. So this model talks about the management, directors, and shareholders. So these major elements have an interaction during the annual meeting, general meeting, as well as outside the AGM. So what kind of method they use in the Anglo-US model is that equity financing for raising the capital of corporation. So as you all know, US is the largest capital market in the world. And in UK, if you take London Stock Exchange, is the third largest stock exchange in the world after New York and Tokyo. So as you all see that there is a causal relationship between the importance of equity financing, the size of the capital market, and the development of a corporate governance system. As you see, the players in the Anglo-US model includes management, directors, shareholders, government agencies, stock exchanges, self-regulatory organizations, consulting firms, so which advise the corporations or the shareholders to form a corporate governance triangle. These three elements form the CG triangle. Anglo-US model, it has been developed with the free market economy context. So in the Anglo-US model, the interests of shareholders as well as the management may not always coincide. So whatever the laws governing the corporation in the countries using the Anglo-US model, they attempt to reconcile this conflict between the shareholders and the management. So what they do is that they prescribe the election of a board of directors by the shareholders, and the board members, they act as the fiduciaries for the shareholders' interest by overseeing the management on behalf of the shareholders, so that they can reduce the conflicts that arise between the shareholders and the management, because as I already mentioned, it is not necessary that both of their interests should coincide. So to avoid this sort of conflicts, they have this pattern. So how should be the board of directors composition? The board of directors of most corporations, they follow the Anglo-US model that may include both the insiders and outsiders. Insider is a person who is either employed by a corporation or who has a significant personal or business relationship with the corporate management. So that people who belong to this category are termed as insiders. And the outsider is a person or institution who has an indirect relationship with the corporation. So if I say insider who is an executive director, or outsider I can say a non-executive director. Both are the synonyms of insiders and outsider. Insider I can say that he will be known as the executive director. Outsiders are known as non-executive directors or independent directors. In the first session I have shown you about the outsiders and insiders. So this will be the composition of board of directors in the Anglo-US model. I'm again repeating this. Why we have board of directors in the Anglo-US model is that as the conflicts arise, as the interests of both the management and shareholders differ, they have a pattern of electing the board of directors with the composition of both the insiders and outsiders, so that they can act on behalf of the shareholders. They can act as the fiduciaries for the shareholders' interest, so that they can oversee the management activities on behalf of the shareholders. If you see the traditional setup, the same person who has served as both the chairman of the board of director and chief executive of the corporation. The same person will be holding both the profiles. So this has been a practice for several years, and that has led to abuses. So it makes us to concentrate the concentration of power in the hands of one person. So board of directors firmly controlled by one person, serving both as chairman as well as the CEO. So the concentration of power in a small group of management. So the board of directors, they attempt to retain the power over a long period of time. So this is with regard to the Anglo-US model, and this industry structure, as you all see here, this is how the Anglo-US model works. As you see here, the board of directors, they appoint the managers. So the managers, they can manage the firm as a whole, and the stakeholders, creditors, shareholders, as well as the legal system will be part of the firm. This is all about the Anglo-US model. So the Anglo-Saxon model is characterized by the dominance in the company of independent persons and individual shareholders. So the manager is responsible to the board of directors and the shareholders. As you all know, in US, financial market activities, they dominate the allocation of ownership or the control rights into organizations. Legislation, they always appear to be hostile, especially in the banking industry. So now we have seen new regulations because of new economic trends. So enterprises are required to disclose more information compared to the Japanese or German models. Because in financial markets, this is the way it works on. Governance model takes place in organizations at 3 levels, because shareholders, directors, managers, because since managers authority drives and from the administrator's point of view. So the Anglo-Saxon countries, they are characterized by the emergence of financial markets and strong banking restrictions, especially the holding of shares in companies outside the banking sector. So these are all the different parameters in which the Anglo-American model works. So let me consolidate everything now. In this model, they have the right to elect all the members of the board, and the board directs the management of the company. Some of the major features I can say is that this is a shareholder oriented model. This is the base of corporate governance in countries like Britain, Canada, America, Australia, including Commonwealth countries, that includes our country also. We have adopted this as well, because we have a mix of models, and what we are adopting will be discussed in a separate session about the Indian model of corporate governance. So here in Anglo-US model, we have the directors are rarely independent of management, and companies are run by professional managers who have negligible ownership stake. So that is always the clear separation of ownership and management. Like institutional investors, mutual funds, banks, so they are portfolio investors here. So when they are not satisfied with the company's performance, they simply sell their shares in the market and they just quit. In this particular model, the small investors are protected and large investors are discouraged to take active role in corporate governance. So this is what the Anglo-US model is. Now let's move on to the next model, which is the German model. See, in the German model, there is a two-tiered board system. It has a management board and a supervisory board. The management board is made up of inside executives of the company. Supervisory board is made up of outsiders. They will be shareholder representatives as well as labor representatives. These two boards are completely separate, and the size of the supervisory board is set by the law and cannot be changed by the shareholders. And here in German model also, like the Anglo-US model, we have the voting right, but that is restricted for the shareholders. They can only vote a certain share percentage regardless of their share ownership. So this is how the German model works. As you see in this particular picture, there are two different boards and how it is functioning. In the German model, it is believed that workers are one of the key stakeholders in the company. Even you can call this model as an European model. And as workers are considered to be the key part of a particular firm, they should have the right to participate in the management of the company. So here the CG is carried out in such a way that in supervisory board, employees also elect their representative, and that makes with 1/3 or half of the board. In the management board, the supervisory board appoints and monitors the management board. Supervisory board has the right to dismiss the management board, and even they can go for reconstituting it same. So this is how the German model works. As you have seen, the different elements that has been formed in the Anglo-US model, we have seen the different elements that forms the German model as well. Worldwide, if you see, we have been adopting several different models, and these are the major ones. Now moving on to the third one, the Japanese model. The Japanese model is characterized by the high level of stock ownership, as it has been affiliated with more of banks and companies. So it has a banking system where it is characterized by the strong and long-term link between the bank and the corporation. So here they have a framework that designs and supports the industrial groups that are linked with the trading relationships. In the Japanese system, it is also considered to be many-sided. It is centered around financial institution. The Japanese model raise significant part of capital, since the banks and the other institutions are very high in business. They also work very closely with the management of the company. So the shareholders, main banks, together they appoint the board of directors in the Japanese model, as well as the president. So along with the shareholders, in this particular model, the interest of the lenders is also recognized. So this is how the Japanese model works in the countries who adopt it. So as you all know, how far each and every country is going with a particular culture, different context, and here again the Japanese model brings the holding concept because of the industrial group. So here I have mentioned a term, keiretsu, that means a complex pattern of cooperation and also a competition relationship. So they are adopting a defensive tactics in hostile takeovers. So most of the Japanese firms know they are affiliated with the group of trading partners. They have two types of legal relationships between the shareholders and the unions, customers, suppliers, creditors, government, and another ratio between the administrators and the stakeholders. That includes managers as well. So management decisions, they pursue improving the income and power of an enterprise. So Japanese model, somewhere it is similar to the German one, based on the internal control, but it doesn't focus on the influence of the strong capital market. But it focuses on the existence of the strong shareholders. And who is the strong shareholder we are discussing? The banks. As in the German model, major shareholders are actively involved in the management process, because so as to stimulate the economic efficiency, and we can penalize in the absence, so that you can have a harmonious relationship between the social partners and employees. So this particular Japanese model facilitates the monitoring and flexible financing of enterprise. In Japan, the corporate policies are influenced by the active intervention of the government, because since the officials of the shareholders, officials are stakeholders in the company as well. So central bank, Ministry of Finance, they monitor and they be part of the control within the company. So they have become a strategic partner. So government structures have created an informal negotiation system to implement certain policies and strategies. So here the corporate governance is, the structure is easily achieved in Japan due to the concentrated shareholder structure. Japan has to again go a long way to improve their standards of governance. Still a significant gap is there, and they have to work on the corporate transparency as well. Their main responsibility is to provide debt financing, the existence of equity, and bank directors. Japan's system is focused on transactional networks, and as I already said, the relations between keiretsu and the staple banking system is based on strong management, and these two favorable factors, One is the passivity of shareholders and another one is the predominance of internal directors that form the Japanese model as a whole. So, how far we have discussed how the Japanese model raises significant impact in the part of capital through banking and other financial institutions. Since the bank and the other institutional stakes are very high in business, they are closely moving. So here the Japanese model is taking that particular step. As you all see in this particular diagram, this is how we are moving on with them, and this is a centered around model. So they are handling services by different institutions. Investment banks are there, commercial banks are there, consulting firms are there. So this is how they work, and this is the functioning of Japanese model. So these are all the different models of governance, corporate governance as a whole. The study on the models of corporate governance in various countries that provides the image of specific features. So according to this particular assessment of different models, we can have some learning outcomes where, see, if you managers in US and Britain, they are mainly specialized in finance and marketing, and their mobility is much higher to contrast to France and Japan, because where they tend to remain in the company a long time. In US, most managers are from outside the country compared to France, Italy and Japan, where the situation is completely opposite. US, they have been open to foreign influences, considering this way to a successful diversification of business concepts and strategies. So a good example I can give that companies which are more numerous led by the foreigners. So McDonald's led by the Australian Charles Bell, and Coca-Cola with the Irishman. If you take countries like France, Japan, Italy, where companies are characterized by the governmental influences, so management teams will be more reserved in the global strategies. They tend to maintain a local control. US enhances the quality of accounting in achieving the economic transactions. Unlike Japan, where the capital providers, just such as the Keiritsu and the banks, whatever we have discussed, they have information sources that are not at all public, and the quality of accounting information presented and the relevance for their investment decisions can be questioned. So if you look at the success of the US market, countries like Germany and Japan with the governance model, they have oriented their system closer to the Anglo-Saxon. In contrast, if you see, the Japanese model brings more and more in its center the importance of human capital and focuses on the banking system. As I already discussed this in United States, the quality of accounting is more important, both statistically and economically, where the higher degree of quality is associated with reduced sensitivity of cash flow. Corporate governance addresses concerns about capital providers, risk assessment, capital allocation estimation for maximum efficiency. So the comparisons of systems in the United States, Germany and Japan, it reveals two different answers to the issues. One is direct disclosure of management actions and long-term development of relations between owners and other participants in the entity. The American system emphasizes the role of free market because They exercise a control over the company's owners. Japanese model focuses on business network because they act in an interdependent way and on the own interest that involves all the parties, especially through mutual control. German system, the company is considered as an entity that produces richness so that the market is closely monitoring its economic activity. Each model has emerged from the need to increase economic efficiency. In US, the corporate success is measured by the financial return on the investment capital. The Japanese system, they focus on capital efficiency. The German one concentrates on human capital performance. Look at the parameters. Yeah, how they are measuring the success of the corporates. US measures through the financial return for the invested capital. Japanese firms, they measure according to the capital efficiency. German firms, they concentrate on human capital performance. So the fact is that these systems, they have endured economic and social transformations. Despite all the differences and specific weaknesses, each and every model has enough strength to support the existence and as well as the influence for their nation's own economy. As I can easily say that the strength of the Anglo-American model is their continuous discipline and transparency. In the German model, they have multiple risk areas as well as they have mutual benefit. In the Japanese model, they have the direct influence of owners and decreased optimism. So these are all the strengths of the model. As well as when I discuss about weakness, there is a slow reaction in the German model. Japanese model, they are resistance to change. Anglo-Saxon, failure, the failure one. So in terms of the degree of influence of the participants according to the legal system, in American model you can see institutions, employees, business networks, government, banks, they are part of the individual setup. In Japanese, they have again the same business networks, employees, governments, everybody is there. Here the evaluating the governance efficiency, as I already mentioned. Japan is about human capital, Germany is about social capital, America is about financial performance. See, for outsiders, no, the Japanese system is very difficult to understand because it's based on a legal recognition at national level. There is a mix of public and private property. So in which each and every citizen is accepted the right to a fair share of all those things. So corporations in Japan, they resemble the structure of those of the United States. Here the interest of shareholder overrides. So their status is clearly different in the two models. Those in Japan who have only one quarter of action, that doesn't matter because of the weak capital market and with no influence. So models of governance in Germany and Japan has a very strong presence of interested parties, especially with banks. And that gives them a competitive advantage. In contrary, US, they inhibit the influence of stakeholders that leads to inefficiency that obviously increases the agency cost. So German and Japanese systems, they focus on expanding the public and private partnership that leads to possible competitive advantage that reduce the cost of risk capital. So each model was developed precisely on the aspects of cultural, historical and technological features in which the models appear under the influence of national economic and social conditions. So it turns out that no model of governance is perfect and even better. Their existence over time shows that each one is effective in its own way, and corporate governance structure specific to a country is difficult to transfer to another country. As I already said, no, how it encompasses multiple definition according to different culture, different countries, region, context. Regulations are also framed based on that. So Western societies, they have promoted corporate governance as a democratic culture based on the dynamism and willingness to impose on the market. That has created the condition of globalization. So their objectives are to obtain profit, to support creativity, research and innovation, solution to the globalization requirements. In some European countries, if you see Belgium, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and also at the international organization level like OECD, the objective of developing a mechanism of governance is to improve the information provided on the capital market and to improve the company's performance and being competitive. For countries with tradition in the field and liquid capital markets like France, Germany, UK, their main objective of these mechanisms relate to the board of directors. They want to improve the quality of work or the information provided about the CG. So good governance is still difficult to measure. Organizations, they carry out several assessment mechanisms that needs more representative criteria. The implemented model depends on the firm's theory, and that has given a boundary between markets, entrepreneurs and the society. So these are all the things which I wanted to discuss under the topic of models of corporate governance. So kindly make a note of all the points discussed in today's lecture session about the Anglo-American model, the German model and the Japanese model. These are the important models of corporate governance, and in the next session we will discuss about the Indian model of corporate governance. Thank you for attending today's session.